Hello and welcome to a list from Oscar Cooper Couch Coop. It's with a heavy heart that I bring you this one. It's kind of going to be one of the last PlayStation 4 collations that I do on the channel. There are no more PlayStation 4 exclusives coming, and this list is not time sensitive, i.e. it's not like 2020, it goes right back to year dot. And talking of year dot, this was announced on the PlayStation 3. We're looking at The Last Guardian. It's the first on the list. This was announced on the PlayStation 3, trailers, Team Ico, hype was crazy, and it was put back to the PlayStation 4. And then it came out on the PlayStation 4 mid-life cycle, I think. It was even delayed further. It was one of the most anticipated games of all time for me because of some of the other material they've made, and it was and wasn't a massive disappointment. What it is beautiful. It was one of the first games to truly well implement high dynamic range. And of course, it boasts a lot of super sampling and anti-aliasing, meaning that it kind of is a 4K game. But what it doesn't age well on is that UI system and just the controls, and the camera is a goddamn nightmare. But you just get your breath taken away sometimes with certain scenes, and of course how they animated and made your buddy giant crow slash bull thing. As far as gameplay goes, it leans towards the puzzle, it leans towards working out how to get through this amazing looking world with your compadre in tow. And because it's massive and it does fight and there are very few enemies, I was thinking this may be a little bit of a hack and slash like the original Ico, but it's its own thing, which I respect, and it really is nice to have on the PlayStation 4 because of all of that hype. It's just good to finally get to a destination. Whether it's a destination we wanted or not is another kettle of fish. I just think it deserves to be recognised as a stunning PlayStation 4 exclusive. The Last Guardian. Oh my god, what's this? Well, you might not recognise it. It's infamous Second Son. It is obviously very old, and it was one of the best open world superhero games available on the PlayStation 4 in its early years. There obviously are better similar games that came into the roster, but this one really blew my mind because of its kind of neon implementation. They put an update in about 2 years ago, a year ago, which again is leaning towards a 4K mimic with checkerboarded, crisping up that image and making it above the standard HD 1080. So that's really impressive that they came back, gave it a nice patch and made it look absolutely beautiful. A very large DLC pack that's with it, where you play a different character with different powers and everything. That's really worth looking at if you've only played the base game. What you will notice on this footage is that it's got a very deep HDR color range, meaning that the blacks are ridiculous and that most of this footage is night footage. My save is locked. There's nothing about the open world in this. A bit like Spider-Man, doesn't have a dynamic day and night system. It's set within what sort of mission you're up to, so apologies for that, but it does show off the fact that HDR is implemented, and wow, it really does pop out when you're doing this neon night stuff. It's from Sucker Punch, and they actually have a very good record for delivering excellent PlayStation 4 exclusives. Spoilers, this isn't the only game from them on the list, but it's really great to have infamous Second Son back again on my play roster because I'm getting back into open world superhero games with the new Spider-Man out. It's really cool to just get back into this again. The game does a really good job with throwing enemies at you that also have powers. You're not the only superhero in this city, and that's a brilliant idea because you get to execute some absolutely crazy moves and get fired upon by some complete lunatic, almost supervillain types. Infamous Second Son. Okay, we're back in with another Team Ico game, and this one's a remake slash remaster. Very naughty of me to put this on the list. This is only 10 games, so there are some exclusives that didn't actually make it on here. I think you lot will get over not seeing Knack 1 and Knack 2. I've included this because the team that remastered this or ported it onto the PlayStation 4 from the PlayStation 3 are the same guys that have done Demon Souls. And if you're a fan of the internet or reviews, you probably would have heard that that's clearing up and is one of the best PlayStation 5 release titles. So that's why we need to pay attention to this now. Shadow of the Colossus was a strange game back when it came out on the PlayStation 2, and it kind of still is a bit of an anomaly. It's 16 bosses that you don't have any between additional enemies. There's no mini bosses or even smaller enemies that you deal with between these fights, and you actually travel around on this incredible landscape, always horsebound, and you are doing it all for some very elusive reasons. One of the nearest things I can compare it to is maybe a Monster Hunter game, because there's no actual lock button. There is a little switch between range and melee, but it's kind of all about getting onto the monster and taking out parts of the monster. The monsters themselves are actual set pieces. They're phenomenal. They are all special in their own right, and they all require an approach that can be completely different each time. Just looking at the game is a complete pleasure, and you can see the ground up build that went into putting this thing onto a PlayStation 4. It is so smooth and so beautiful, and the real stars of the show, as they should be, are all the creatures and monsters. And to have this on HD and just on a huge great screen years after owning it, on the PlayStation 2 system, is just amazing feeling. If you know the channel, you know I always use this fight as an example on the footage. For me, it kind of straddles everything. The tension of jumping onto it when it comes in for that flyby. It just getting the attention of the creature itself is frightening. But navigating its tail and having to sort of walk the plank back to the main body to find these parts that you're gonna brutalize is just one of the flagship moments of the game. Absolutely adore this. Please come out with something that's better than The Last Guardian, guys. Shadow of the Colossus. Yeah, we're up to Spider-Man. Spider-Man featured heavily in my best open world video. This has got Batman Arkham in it. This has got Assassin's Creed in it. This has even got weird Rockstar vibes to it. The game was flawless. Insomniac had a brilliant reputation with fluid traversal in a lot of their games. They came out with such a good title here. This equals the PlayStation 2 Spider-Man in droves. It felt so liberating using that swing mechanic for the first time on a PlayStation 4 system and seeing the city go past you in beautiful detail and no sacrifice to any frame rates whatsoever. The superhero open world genre is a tough one, and those early Batman, Arkham and City games, they got it right, and they took some chunks of that formula and put it in here, especially with the combat and especially with the ad hoc missions. That's one of the things that needs to be important, is when you're playing a superhero, you need to feel like you're kind of looking after the city, and you want to do little jobs and little things and come across random events that bolster that feeling, and there's certainly loads of that here. Story-wise and boss-wise, again, I was concerned that they were going to bugger that up, but they put really cool bosses in at the right times, paid homage to the proper source material, and introduced some cool new enemies that weren't in the films or we haven't really seen before that got explored within this engine. It was brilliant. I still play Sunset Overdrive because I got to it so late and I can get it on the Windows 10 now. And of course, Tony Hawk's 1 and 2 came out as remasters on the PlayStation 4, and they're one of the best split-screen couch co-op franchises on the market. That's been recently reviewed, link in description. But I love the old unlocks and the retro suits and some of the outlandish suits. There's been one put in with a recent updated thing, which is like the biker, what's it called? Rider suit. I stuck with that for the rest of the footage.
You know anyone?
Actually, I do. His name is Miles Morales.
Yes, of course, the Miles Morales release of the new Spider-Man on the PlayStation 5 is now currently out, and I will be snapping that straight up, and of course I've heard nothing but good things about that as well. It looks like Insomniac's Spider-Man franchise is here to stay, and good job, and great to see a superhero game on a top 10 list. Okay, it's time for something completely different, and it's Wipeout the Amiga Collection. This was a game that came out when the PlayStation 4 Pro came out. You remember that it was probably one of their sort of launch, everyone look at this amazing remake with, now this does lean very closely to 4K. This may be one of the true 4K games that came out on the PlayStation 4. Featuring 60 frames per second locked, featuring split screen couch co-op, featuring one of the best VR free implementations / updates I've ever had the fortune to play. So top marks there. I remember being a kid and playing the original Wipeout and hearing Firestarter by the Prodigy, not for the first time, but hearing it playing a video game. To hear a cool song that you were actually into whilst playing a cool game that you actually like on a system that was like from Japan, and you know, this game had this really good art style to it with its sort of almost futuristic bubble art thing going on, this fantastic colour. It was well ahead of its time. It was all made in the UK, but it was just, it felt so futuristic. It felt like we were at the next stage of arcade racer. I was like, I'm never going to go back to racing a car ever again. And this was back in the 90s.
Missile.
There was at least 4 of us that bought it on the week of launch when it came out on the PlayStation 4 and immediately hopped online to race each other. And some of the anguish and just sheer frustration and the feeling of hurtling around these corners with a loaded missile pointed at the back of your mate's spaceship is something you just can't recreate everywhere. Wipeout is head and shoulders above loads of arcade racers, and I always put the split screen mode on my lists. And there's a great trophy system, a great sort of tier system, and it's brilliant to look at all of the new spaceships that you unlock. And we haven't even covered the soundtrack. The new soundtrack on it is mind-bending. Did the rounds free for a month. It's kind of like 4 years old now. You'd probably be able to pick it up physical for a beautiful price. Wipeout the Amiga Collection. Oh Christ. What number are we on? And this is The Last of Us Part 2. At just over midway on the list. Okay, sit down. It's alright. I'm going to explain this. I love this game. This is the pinnacle of visuals for the PlayStation 4. Okay, that is. I thought it was Red Dead Redemption, but this is so stunning. But think about it, it's not technically an open world game. A lot of this stuff we're looking at, if you were to pull away a lot of the visuals, you'd see that they were just rectangular corridors. It doesn't really allow that much freedom of movement, but I still love it to bits. And that story, we're going to get to it. But blimey. So why on earth is it at number 6? Well, this is how I see it. I love zombie shooters, okay? And when The Last of Us Part 2 came out and all that media coverage kicked off, I kind of was like, whoa, what's the zombie shooting like? And a lot of the big name reviewers or even just the sites were just swept away with the controversies surrounding loads of aspects of the content within the character interactions and who you play as and all. And I was just like, Jesus, guys, where's the shotguns and headless zombies still walking towards you after you've killed them? It is there, but you're looking for it. You shouldn't have to look for it. It should be everywhere. If you want to go into that story, you can. And the story in its predecessor grabbed me by surprise. I didn't buy that game or get into that game because of the interaction between those two characters. It was a real pleasant surprise. But remember, it was coupled with a large amount of sort of stealth killing and taking down big camps and dealing with zombie stragglers. The team that make this game, the technical team, not the writers, they're the best in the industry. And I'll tell you now that the Last of Us games are really envied by the other side, PC/Xbox owners. Everybody who is tempted to buy a Sony system is tempted because of these games. That's a bit of a broad stroke, but I'm pretty damn sure that the jealousy runs high when they look at some of the Last of Us Part 2 footage, especially these scenes which involve stealth mechanics, high AI programming, the way that that tribe that whistles can communicate around you, there's a high level of production and design here. To take it all in on a technical level, if you're looking at the game graphically, is exhausting. There's stuff happening and lying around and details on stuff just everywhere. There's so much of it. But when it comes to the fighting and the panic and the zombification of the whole game, it does deliver for me. But I just wish it wasn't marred by this story content that has managed to alienate, 70% of the game's audience. Anyway, The Last of Us Part 2. So the PlayStation 4 came out in 2014 in the European US release, and Bloodborne came out in 2015, March of 2015. And between those two dates, I had to really deliberate on what console I was going to buy. You guys might not believe this, but I was a 360 fanboy. I own nearly every physical 360 game. I know, crazy. So making the jump back to Sony after the PlayStation 2 was a real difficult decision for me. I wasn't keen on how the PlayStation 3 went down, but when I saw Bloodborne and when I heard it was an exclusive, I was like, Titanfall 2, don't worry, I'm playing the new From Software game. And I think that's very interesting, and I think it's a sign of the times as well. Consoles used to have amazing platform exclusives on launch. Look at the Halo stuff in the original Xbox. And Bloodborne was really up there with one of the reasons why you need to own a PlayStation 4. I think we're moving towards big AAA releases almost always being multi-platform on launch. But it would have all been wasted if Bloodborne was just a soulless reskin of a Dark Souls game. It's so far from that. It does borrow so much from the combat system within their franchise, but the lore, the Lovecraftian art style and story, and everything about Yharnam and the way I discovered the game, how it revealed itself to me. That scream of the Undying Priest as you go up that ladder, everything is in the right place with this game. It did a really interesting thing with the combat, with a reward system on your health if you were aggressive, and gave you a cool gun. This changed a lot. Is it my favourite From Software game? The jury's out on that one. Sometimes I feel like it is. Then I will swing back to Dark Souls 3, and then I start getting all... Dark Souls 1 was amazing. All three of those games are top level. This one is no exception. Bloodborne. Oof, I better get the riot gear ready for the accostement that I'll get in the comments about putting this game as number 3. The original, remastered, The Last of Us 1. What a bombshell. One of the best PlayStation 4 exclusive out there. It's a remaster, you lying fucker. Doesn't matter, I'm letting that go. Because I think saying it's better than Last of Us 2 is really dangerous. Watching it perform on the PlayStation 3 and hearing about it over on the other side with an Xbox 360 was excruciating, and didn't get to play this game in its original form. I just went straight to the remastered version. It was the first time that a Naughty Dog game had sort of really hit home with what it was trying to say, what it had constructed, and how it wanted you to navigate the various pitfalls and options within the world that they've made. It was such a balanced affair, but it was also set in one of the best dystopian / zombie apocalypse universes on the system. It was really well explored. The characters were so fleshed out. I didn't know that was going to come and bite us in the arse for the sequel. Okay, no more slating The Last of Us Part 2. Imagine never playing these two games and buying them both and playing them back to back. I wonder how you would feel about what the original was saying and how the second one followed up the story. There's a huge tale to be told within this universe, of course, but I think its favourite section of that tale for me is in the original.
Come on. More on the way. Barricade the door.
Some flawless HDR implementation added as an update, and some of the best DLC that left behind stuff, the dialogue, the brilliance of that is really worth the look, and it's bundled in with the remastered package. The Last of Us 1. Okay, we're up to number 2, and I don't think there's going to be too much beef with this decision. God of War, and the brand new, amazing addition to a very strong franchise on the Sony side, but a current gen, we can't call it current gen anymore.
Mimir, we're on the lake.
A previous gen reskin of the God of War third-person hack and slash genre, but introduced as a modern classic, a true beautiful modern classic. Kratos' characters and his universe and his relationships never looked so good as a fleshed out character, and having villains that are just so frightening. I got the art book with my purchase, and some of the drawings of those Nordic monsters are absolutely amazing. Moving that combat system to a very close over the shoulder action RPG-esque angle gives the game this great level of depth, and also the voice acting, audio recording, sound production, and everyone involved in some of the main actors' voices gave it all. This is a brilliant production. A lot of PC owners that I talk to really want this game. It's one of the starter blocks for getting a PlayStation 4. I think this, Bloodborne, and of course The Last of Us Remastered are the milestones, or the base level of games that you need when you have a PlayStation 4. Just want to touch on that combat briefly, because I play a lot of third-person ARPGs. They're a huge section of the market, I think, for PlayStation 4 games. So for this game to sort of align itself with that competition and really deliver on an amazing combat system, I'm talking about that range with the axe, some of the loot and the way that they implement the armor changes and pieces. You even have a return of the dual blades that he wielded in the original games. Holy Christ.
I think that's a keeper.
One of the things I've spoken about before and was very well recognised within the awards industry was Kratos' relationship, or complicated relationship, with his son going forward, dealing with loss and tragedy and fleshing out relationships with other characters within this universe. It was a section of the game that was so professionally handled, it was recognised everywhere. I really liked that idea. And of course, this combat, this kick-ass combat is some of the best on the system. God of War is number 2 on my top 10 PlayStation 4 exclusives. Oh, hey, no you don't. Yes I do. Sucker Punch get 2 games on this list. Who else gets 2 games on this list? There's 2 Last of Us games, but Sucker Punch are, I think, some legends for what they've given us exclusively on the PlayStation 4. Just seeing it and playing it and wielding that samurai sword with devastating precision and working out what the game wants from you in regards to how its combat flows and what the open world is sort of telling you with this conflict is a complete tour de force on the visual front. And a lot of people stood back and realized that it's all about using a system's CPU and GPU to its optimum, and it's just a shame that we've come to the end of the system's life only to realize that a game like Ghost of Tsushima has some of the best visuals on an open world game. It took that long to squeeze out all of those brilliant tricks that developers are going to use to give this world life, and this world has so much life. The source material needs to be paid homage to correctly. You know, you're recreating a whole culture's dynasty. And that is handled with a relative amount of respect it also gives you so much visual pleasure with its costume designs and interesting combat techniques. The combat's pretty bold as well, shunning a lock-on system in favour of more of an Arkham flowing system, which dovetails into other moves and just gives a beautiful fluid dance almost to its combat and slashing and hacking. Even the range is handled dignifiedly, not a word. Going into this game, you're very carefully drip fed a lot of what that combat's going to offer you. No major loot drops with different sword types, but some really cool armors and some really cool stances. Bit like the Neo games, you've got 4 different stances to counter a lot of the stuff that the enemies are coming at you with. And also a lot of variation on mission types. Some of them are rescue or protect or even stealth and creep missions. Games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey have recently pumped in like really familiar color-coded purple to green loot systems. They work on an addiction level, but they don't really provide too much depth and substance into stuff like lore and story. This one nails that, because you live and die by that sword. It's your technique that's updated. It's your stances that increase and your abilities to start dealing with more and more dangerous foes. That's a really cool angle to come in at an ARPG at. The idea of that samurai code slowly wearing away in favour of some stealth missions or just behaving a bit more in the shadows as opposed to going out and doing the standoffs is kind of welcome, because it throws up different gameplay elements, creeping under the buildings, stabbing people in the back of the neck in the dark. I like those ideas mixed with that furiously fast and crazily hectic hack and slash swordplay. I have actually placed this game above The Last of Us and God of War. Think about it. This is a crazy thing to do, but I think deep down the story equals those aforementioned games. The depth equals it. The combat is stunning and everything visually works. It was a complete success. Sucker Punch, we love you. Ghost of Tsushima, best PS4 exclusive. See you there!